I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with the head. Intercepted. 30. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast, live on YouTube today. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish. Evan, I'm fired up today. We have got, believe it or not, we kind of have a stacked show. I know there hasn't been a lot going on this week in particular in regards to Buccaneer news, but we got a lot to cover. We're going to get a little bit into the NFL draft today, less than a month away from the draft in Green Bay. Things are going to start to pick back up, but we have a lot to talk about today, and I think the improvement of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers headed into 2025 is obviously going to be a common theme throughout the rest of the offseason. So we'll put a bow on free agency, dive into the draft a little bit today, and then some. I'm excited to get started.
Yeah, you know, the Bucs made... Well, since we last spoke to you guys, the Bucs made a flurry of moves. Nothing groundbreaking, but I think it's depth, and it's depth that may impact their draft plans, right? So this is sort of depending on the Buccaneers always can determine this, whether or not they go out and sign somebody, but this is probably it for the free agency talk, right? There's probably not going to be as much free agency talk now from us. We're going to be focusing into the draft, so I think, like you said, putting a bow on free agency, what they did in the past week or so, sort of setting themselves up for the draft, maybe not pigeonholing themselves in just one position at one spot. I think that's important. So, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. And there's a couple of things that, a couple of signings that may impact what they do in April, and also may impact guys that are already on the team currently. So, they did make a couple more moves since we last spoke to you guys. And, yeah, we're excited to break them down today.
And I think something else that can come along with talking about these moves is talking about the development of some of the other guys in the same position group, right? The first free agent headline we have, I know this isn't necessarily breaking news. It is certainly not the biggest signing the Bucs have made, but they did bring back wide receiver Sterling Shepard on a 1-year deal. He's not getting paid very much, a little bit above the vet minimum from what I understand. I know the contract number is out there somewhere, but it's not a lot. So I don't think it's anything people should be up in arms about, but people have been vocal in one way or another about the return of Sterling Shepard, and I feel like that might be unfair to him with him being at this stage in his career, but I think it's important to talk about this signing because when we talk about the Buccaneers potentially getting better and being built to win in 2025, we talk about the development of players like Jalen McMillan, and bringing back Sterling Shepard, I think, helps that wide receiver room a little bit. This was a quote that came out. Sterling Shepard talking about Jalen McMillan. He said, quote, "I love the way that he progressed over the season. I told him you're going into your second season. The game is going to slow down for you. It's a pretty big jump going from college to the NFL and the speed of itself. And the looks, these defenses do a great job of disguising at this level. I think experience is what you have to have. We have a lot of guys with experience and that are able to talk to these younger guys and give them a couple of tips and pointers where it needs to be. I was just happy to see how he progressed over the season and how he matured. I think it's going to be taken to a different level this season." So all of that about Sterling Shepard, to ask you this about Jalen McMillan, he was on one hell of a pace to wrap up 2024. And, we've seen a lot of these rookies come in and be a huge impact for this team on both sides of the ball. You remember Yaya Diaby led the team in sacks his rookie season. Had a very quietly impressive 2024, I would say. He was, again, one of the better NFL edge rushers in pressures, getting after the quarterback, just not necessarily getting the quarterback. The sack total went down. Some people would say that he was underwhelming. Call it a sophomore slump. Call it whatever you want. Jalen McMillan, I think, is a very exciting prospect here, and looking at this wide receiver room in 2025, having the experienced guys around him, like Sterling Shepard, is going to help out. But what are your thoughts on Jalen McMillan here? Do you think he is in for a sophomore slump? Do you think people are going to get so excited they start putting unrealistic expectations on him? Because it seemed like at times in his rookie year, that's what people did too.
That's the only concern I would have. I don't know if I would say I'm concerned about a sophomore slump. I do think the expectations maybe need to be tempered a bit because you're looking at, okay, we talked about Jalen McMillan, how he finished the season. Well, you have to remember that was without Chris Godwin, right? And assuming Chris Godwin's healthy and good to go for week 1 and hopefully he can play an entire season, Jalen McMillan isn't going to be this team's wide receiver 2, right? So he's not going to get the same snaps, the same opportunities, the same looks that he did towards the end of the season last year because Chris Godwin simply wasn't there. So McMillan had to elevate his game, right? And he did that. That's great. So I do think that maybe the expectations need to be tempered a bit, but I mean, he's still going to be your wide receiver 3. And in today's NFL, just like we talk about with cornerbacks, your nickel corner is a starter, right? Your wide receiver 3 is a starter for you at this point, right? In today's NFL, it's just the way the game's being played. So he still is going to be an important piece of the offense. And hopefully he doesn't have a sophomore slump. Obviously, it can happen. There's a reason that's a thing, right? There's a reason it's called a sophomore slump. Teams start to figure out what your tendencies are. Teams start to, maybe game plan a bit more to shut you down. A guy like Bucky Irving may experience a similar thing, right? Defenses are going to be paying a lot more attention to guys like Bucky Irving and Jalen McMillan in 2025 than they did last year. So I don't know if he's going to have a sophomore slump. The one thing, like I said, I would be worried about was maybe the expectations, right? Because look, and Chris Godwin is 100% healthy, and hopefully Mike Evans stays 100% healthy. I know that's been an issue for both guys, right, that play a full season. So, I mean, football is a contact sport. They might miss some time, but if they both are 100% healthy, I worry that fans are going to be a little underwhelmed by Jalen McMillan's lack of production just because you have these two guys here that are so good at what they do that they're going to take away from some targets, from some snaps, and from some opportunities. But long term, I still have a lot of faith in Jalen McMillan. I still think he can be a wide receiver 2 on this team. I think the Buccaneers might have been prepared that if Chris Godwin left in free agency, I think they might have been prepared for Jalen McMillan to be their wide receiver 2. So I think they like him a good bit as well. I don't think he's going to completely disappear. But I do think that the expectations maybe should be toned down just a bit. I don't know if you're going to see a leap from year 1 to year 2 just because of the situation that he's in.
Well, I think another thing that's important to mention here and interesting to think about is the presence of offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard and what his tendencies are going to look like. Liam Cohen kind of changed his attack methods throughout the year, right? He was still very surgical, but there were some weeks like that New Orleans game where you saw Sean Tucker get as much work as he did. Bucky Irving really kind of broke out again. That was another great performance for him. But over the course of the year, they just stopped using Sean Tucker altogether. And I don't know if it was, we can point at a lot of reasons as to what that may have been. But Grizzard isn't going to do the same thing. Like, he's going to favor other players over others in his system, but like, he's going to have different tendencies. We're going to get to a point where guys, I think, are going to end the year being used much differently than they were in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of the season. And with that being said, I do think there could be some what's the word I'm looking for? I guess some highlight games for Jalen McMillan. I do think that obviously the potential that he had last year in his rookie season, 37 catches, 461 yards, 8 touchdowns. He had 5 of those touchdowns in the last 4 games of the season. So, again, the explosiveness factor that is there, his ability to get open, I think NFL defenses are going to adjust. Having a new offensive coordinator is going to be an adjustment. But I don't know. I'm just excited to see how he can develop. I'm excited to see his usage in this offense. And this wide receiver room overall, I think a signing like Sterling Shepard isn't going to really get people excited. It may get them excited for the wrong reasons. A lot of people weren't very kind when they commented on our post about him coming back.
It's a wide receiver 4. Come on.
Yeah, I'm happy to have him here. He's got a good relationship with Baker Mayfield, and he just seems like another locker room guy that this team is full of. So,
Well, and also one more thing as it relates to the Shepard signing and then the draft kind of wide receiver was a position that maybe, they would look at. I think if Godwin had left, I think you could have looked at potentially in round 1. But maybe they would have looked on day 2 or early day 3 for a wide receiver. Now, I mean, look, they can always fall in love with a guy, right? And in the 4th or 5th round, pick him, whatever. But I don't think you're pressed to do that now, right? You don't feel the need that if you don't pick a wide receiver at all in this draft, okay, but like I've talked about it a lot about how because people would ask me like, well, you think they would consider wide receiver earlier in the draft? And I said, yeah, even if Godwin came back, just because I keep bringing it up. They played the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl champions, back-to-back Super Bowl champions. They played them with Sterling Shepard and Ryan Miller as their 2 wide receivers. So, like, yeah, like it could be an issue, right? Like it could be a serious issue, especially if this team is trying to not only win a division, but potentially, make some noise in the playoffs. What if you're going in that playoff game with Sterling Shepard and Ryan Miller as your wide receivers, right? So wide receiver depth is extremely important. And I don't know if the Buccaneers are 100% done at wide receiver, but again, like I mentioned earlier, re-signing Shepard, it doesn't pigeonhole you, right? You don't have to go out and say, well, man, we really want this defensive end, but we need a wide receiver. You don't have to do that now, right? Now you have that a little bit covered, even if Shepard isn't the biggest name or maybe won't play the biggest role for you. I still think he's pretty important in that locker room, and I think it's a good thing that he's back. Now, would I have maybe looked for a different guy? Maybe, like there's still a couple guys out there that I maybe would have looked at. I think I had mentioned Elijah Moore on my mock offseason. He's still out there, I Bleav. But Shepard knows Baker, obviously, knows the system. Obviously, it's not going to be the exact same system, than Liam Cohen's, right? It's going to be a little different with Josh Grizzard, but I still think having Shepard back it's a fine move, and I'm not going to get worked up over a wide receiver 4 where hopefully he's not playing significant snaps down the stretch, right? Because if he is, that means that one of or 2 of the top 2 or 3 guys are not available for the Bucs.
we continue the conversation of depth spots, potential training camp battles here down the line. But on the offensive line, the Buccaneers re-signed offensive guard Sua Opeta, 28 years old, missed the entire season last year due to a knee injury during training camp. Before he signed with the Bucs, he had played in 38 games for the Eagles from 2020 to 23 with 10 starts. He will be back. Now, when you look at the depth for that offensive guard room, Robert Hainsey left, so things are going to be changing a little bit. You don't have some of these guys anymore, like a Nick Leverett, but you do have an Elijah Klein who's in the mix somewhere. 6th-round pick for the Buccaneers a couple of years ago now. Sua Opeta going to be back in the mix. When you look at the offensive line depth here, it's a little different, but what are your thoughts overall? And what are your thoughts on bringing Opeta back? Because I do like the move. I think we gave him his roses last week, or a couple weeks ago, the last time we had done our show.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's good depth. Obviously, Ben Bredesen's going to be your starter, which last year the storyline was Ben Bredesen versus Sua Opeta for the starting guard job. Now, I there's some people that think, well, it's Bredesen's job to lose anyway. Well, Opeta ends up getting hurt, suffers a season-ending knee injury like the first couple of days of training camp. So that pretty much did that in. And I think you can go back and listen. I think I predicted Opeta to win that job. Now, obviously, Bredesen has worked out, and I don't Bleav Opeta is going to be the starting left guard for this team week 1. But I think that that's good depth, right? And you can never have too much depth, especially when the Bucs, like you said, lost Robert Hainsey, got a bigger deal from Jacksonville, which was expected, right? He wasn't expected to be back. But you mentioned Elijah Klein, somebody they like. They drafted last year on day 3. Sort of definitely a project, right? And not a guy who you want, stepping in, immediately. So he's there now at the guard spot. And then you have Opeta back. So I do like their interior depth a decent bit. You don't really have Mike. One concern is you don't really have much like center wise. So like if something were to happen to Graham Barton, like what goes on there? Like who ends up playing center? But again, there's an entire draft. There's still free agency, right? That they can sign somebody. There's vets that get cut all the time. Maybe after the draft, somebody gets cut, and in training camp, somebody gets cut. Final roster cuts. There's plenty of opportunities, but that would be the one concern. But I mean, if you're looking at their depth now along the interior, if you're not looking at the center position, I mean, you gotta like their guard situation with Bredesen and Cody Malk there as the starters, and Opeta and Elijah Klein right behind them. So I do like their depth there, and I think re-signing him, giving him a shot to be healthy, for a full year, I think is a pretty smart move, and one I wasn't really expecting them to do, but I'm glad they did.
Yeah, and when we talk about the starters along this offensive line, continuity is going to be a big thing because this is the first year in a while that the Buccaneers have carried over their same starting offensive line from the season before. It hasn't happened post-Tom Brady era. So, I mean, these guys are really building a rapport with each other. I think Ben Bredesen, I don't know about surprised people, but he earned his contract. He got paid, played a good starting season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think was maybe a little bit better than some expected him to be, but the cohesiveness this group has now with a year of playing with each other under their belt, I mean, Tristan Wirfs and Luke Gedeke being your most experienced guys at this point, and them being as impressive as, or I'm sorry, Ben Bredesen probably having the most experience, but, Wirfs and Gedeke being right behind him, I think they're in good shape. I think they are, in terms of the NFL as a whole, a widely underrated offensive line. Tristan Wirfs gets the headlines, absolutely. He deserves them. He's a monster. He's going to go down as one of the best, but these guys are building a good unit, and it's good to see that offensive line has become a strength of this team. When you look at the Buccaneer teams of the 2010s, and you look at Jameis Winston's early career.
No, I mean that the year before Jameis, that 2014 offensive line, that's a brutal offensive line. I mean they had literally two players that were good, right?
Logan
it was
Mankins.
DeMar Dotson that Logan Mankins. Like that was it. Evan Dietrich Smith, no. Anthony Collins, definitely not.
J.R.
Yeah,
Sweezy.
I mean,
J.R. Sweezy.
J.R. Sweezy was a little bit later.
Goster, well, I'm just throwing names out there now. Goster
Yeah,
Sherrills.
I mean, yeah. I was talking about that line specifically because that was the worst line I had seen. But ever since, I mean, really, once Tristan Wirfs came to town, right? And I mean, the 2019 offensive line, the first year with Arians, like it was okay, right? Like it was decent. But I mean, they did start to improve. Ali Marpet comes to town. He ends up hitting. They get Alex Kappa, Donovan Smith, who I know a lot of people don't love, but still was a starting left tackle for a long time in the NFL, right? Not easy to do. And then ever since 2020, yeah, I mean, you kind of been a little spoiled, right? Because I think the last year, the offensive line, you could say was like, was maybe 2022. Because I know obviously they were working with Gedeke as a rookie. They tried him out of guard. It really didn't work.
And you remember
they lost Ryan Jensen. Yeah.
Well, a big thing all year too was Brady was getting rid of the ball so quickly because he was scared of the pressure. People were like, "Oh, he doesn't trust this line, so he's getting rid of the ball quickly." And I mean, to a degree, guys were getting there pretty quickly.
Yeah, but I mean, and the thing is with this offensive line is there's an opportunity for them to get even better. I mean, you have Luke Gedeke entering year 4, by the way, a contract year, so he's gonna be playing for money, right? This is gonna be a motivated player. You have Cody Malk entering year 3. So you hope, I mean, a lot of the rule of thumb with a lot of these draft picks, right, is year 3, right, is when they sort of reach their peak, like, of who they're gonna be, basically. So if he takes another step, right, year 3, Graham Barton is all talent in the world. What if he takes another step in year 2, right? If Ben Bredesen continues to be solid, I mean, we know what Tristan Wirfs is, what he's going to bring to the table. I mean, you could be looking at potentially a top 3 offensive line in the NFL if these guys make another jump, because it's a good group and it's a young group, and that's the important thing there, I think. So when you talk about, like you said, I think Bredesen, I Bleav, is the oldest one, but the longest tenured Buccaneer, is Tristan Wirfs. Well, Wirfs has only been on the team for 5 years, so it's going to be 5 years in April. so that he's been on the team. So this is a good group and it's a young group. So I do like the Bucs offensive line a whole lot, and it's going to help and make everything so much easier for your quarterback, for your running backs, for your play caller, no matter who it is. Good offensive line, good offensive line, good defensive line. Two things you got to have to win football games in the NFL. You will not be able to win if you don't have those things.
And I don't know if we're going to go as in-depth on the defensive line, but a lot of the things that you said about having a young group, guys playing in a contract year, that I think can be applied to the defensive line with some of these guys really starting to hit a pivotal year. Kalijah Kancey and Yaya Diaby are the two biggest names on that list. I am so excited to see what they can do. Obviously want to see them stay healthy and stay on the field. Kalijah Kancey, as dominant as he has been, both seasons he has played, he's had to miss some games due to injuries. So hopefully he doesn't have any lingering issues. He can stay healthy throughout camp because that's where his problem started in 2024. But I am excited. This is a second-year D tackle that just led the team in sacks next to Vita Vea. And then we're talking about Yaya Diaby, who, again, I think the sack number might underwhelm some people. But overall, he is a force. He is a menace. And he's going to be playing hungry as well. In year 3, both of those guys are going to be earning a lot of money here in the next couple of years. I have no doubt about that. But I really wanted to dive more into this secondary, Evan. And as far as I know, this is the last free agent signing we have to talk about until, kind of the scavenger picks later on. But Bryce Hall is back on a 1-year deal. The Buccaneers bring him back. Another player, just like Sua Opeta, who his season ended very early.
Yep. It ended. He got a little bit further than Opeta. It ended in week 1 against the Washington Commanders. So yeah, it ended in week 1. He was a player that, again, the Bucs had high hopes for, and didn't really envision him as a cornerback 1 or 2, right? That was Jamel Dean, Zion McCollum, but they thought he was going to be their cornerback 3 for the entire season, and it really was over before it really began for Bryce Hall.
Yeah, and this is a write-up from Scott Smith, Buccaneers.com. The former New York Jet was expected to be the team's primary third corner alongside Jamel Dean and Zion McCollum. He was the first one in after McCollum suffered a concussion in the season opener. However, just 11 snaps into his first game with the Bucs, he sustained a dislocated ankle and was lost for the year. He is a 5th-round pick, and I think just to get people back up to speed, started 26 games for the Jets, played in 39 of them. I know that it's the Jets, but the fact that he was able to contribute and start 26 games as a 5th-round pick over 39 games is, shows you that he can bring a little bit to the table. And I'm excited to see if he can stay healthy. But really, when you look at this secondary, Evan, one, do you think the impact of Bryce Hall is going to be something that fans can look forward to? Because, again, he was really not even in the lineup last year outside of opening day. So his sample size in a Bucs uniform is very little. And I don't think he's going to come in and outperform Zion McCollum. If Jamel Dean is on the roster, I don't necessarily think he'll be better. I could be pleasantly surprised here. Jamel Dean is an up-and-down kind of guy. I don't know if he'll have a stronger year than either of those two players, but he can be a serviceable guy on this Buccaneers defense, especially a secondary that desperately needs a serviceable guy. They've got the guys there when they're healthy, but I don't know. Where does Bryce Hall end up here?
Yeah, it's interesting because corner is still one of the spots where I do expect the Buccaneers to address it early in the draft. Maybe not first round, but I would be pretty surprised if by the end of day 2 they don't end up with one. It would just, barring anything unforeseen, any unforeseen signing or trade right now, it would be pretty surprising for me to see them not end up with a corner. But signing Bryce Hall, again, depth is depth, and I think Bryce Hall can be pretty strong depth for you, especially if you do plan on playing him in the slot a little bit, because if the Buccaneers are true to their word and they want Tyke Smith to be basically, Antoine Winfield Jr.'s running partner back at safety and lessen that nickel role, well, then I think Bryce Hall almost becomes a starter for you, depending on what you do in the draft. So I do like the move. again, one that I was hoping they would make. I wasn't sure if they would. Figured maybe they'd go in a different route, but it's clear that they're high on both Bryce Hall and Suopeta, right? Because they brought these guys back when they didn't really have much of a sample size for these guys. So they're hoping that both guys, can stay healthy and be contributors. So, yeah, I mean, I think right now he probably slots in as your cornerback 3. Um, but I think eventually, when it's all said and done in training camp, I think he's more in line with your cornerback 4, maybe. Depending on if the rookie that they draft, maybe he can play the slot, maybe he can't, and maybe Bryce Hall is just sort of that cornerback 3, and the rookie just sort of roams around, kind of, right? Is in different spots and stuff like that, situational football. But I do like the Bryce Hall signing. I think it's, again, depth is depth, and you can never have enough. The other issue that the Buccaneers had last year was they were playing guys like Tyreek Funderburk and Josh Hayes simply because they had nobody else, right? Jamel Dean got hurt, and Tom McCullum got banged up a couple of times. Bryce Hall, right, got hurt. So Tavier Thomas is no longer with the Buccaneers. Yes, they signed Kindle Vildor, but so that's some depth there, but you need some depth along the cornerback room, and today's offenses are just too good, right? And if you're rolling out, all due respect to Tyreek Funderburk and Josh Hayes and everybody they rolled out last year, but if you're rolling out those guys again to try and win a game you need late in December against the Falcons, or for the division, or you're trying to win a wild card game or whatever it may be, it's just not going to work. So you need to have that depth, and I do like Bryce Hall a good bit in that spot.
And I don't want to come off like our good friend James Hill, a.k.a. Mr. Bucs Nation, who likes everything that the team does. But I remember when they brought in Bryce Hall, I did like that signing because at the end of the day, serviceable depth, I like him more than the next guy. You brought up a couple of names that the Buccaneers had in their starting lineup last year. Wasn't ideal. I will take Bryce Hall over those guys if it comes down to it. But let's talk about this secondary and just what you think it'll look like a little closer to opening day here for the Bucs. You mentioned the draft, and maybe we can get into some targets, some potential guys you might have on your list here when you look at the secondary. Do you think it's going to look much different? Again, they can add a couple of pieces. If they want to get crazy and add a first or a second round contributor at corner, I would kind of be shocked, but they could get.
I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, you're looking at Jamel Dean, who hasn't really played a full season. Also, basically at this point is going to be on year-to-year stuff. Could still be cut at any moment.
So between free agency and the draft, I mean, you kind of sound like you already think that it as of right now, it's going to look not much different, but noticeably different.
I would expect them to add a corner or somebody in the secondary to play a role early. I do think it's going to be rounds 1 to 3. Now, I say somebody in the secondary because one name that I'll bring up, and I don't want to do, we have a whole month for draft stuff. Trust me, guys, we're going to have plenty of draft content for you. We're doing the draft profiles on bucksnation.com. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn those into the videos that we've been doing. So I'll be talking about some other specific guys. But a guy like Malachi Starks from Georgia, kind of a do-it-all Swiss Army knife safety, can play up in the box, can play up, up top, can play in the slot a little bit. A lot like an Antoine Winfield Jr., right? A guy who
sounds like another safety they got recently too in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, a lot like that type of player. I don't know if he's going to be there at 19. He won't be there in the second round. So that's a first round guy. I'm not sure if he'll be there at 19, but he's a guy I could see them considering. And like I said, there's a couple corners that'll be available at 19. There's a couple guys that are intriguing to me on day 2. I think I look at this room and it still feels like, well, I don't know, because to me, this is, you swap out Kindle Vildor, right, with Tavier Thomas. This is the same room from last year. Yeah. It literally is. It's the same room. So I do think they're going to add somebody at corner or in the secondary in general, whether it be maybe at safety, which that would maybe signal that maybe they like Tyke Smith a bit more at nickel. Maybe they've sort of changed their mind on that. Who knows? But I would expect them to add somebody pretty early.
I don't know. We'll see. I do agree that, something needs to be done about the corner room. Before free agency started, a lot of people had talked about, the Buccaneers potentially moving Jamel Dean some way, somehow. Would you consider that off of the table just because of the timing of things? Or, we still got a full offseason left.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say off the table because that could always be a draft thing, right? If
Yeah.
the Bucs look, if they want a certain draft pick and a team is like, oh, well, yeah, we struck out on this guy and this guy in free agency. Well, we can have Jamel Dean for our, early fourth round pick or late third round pick. I could see something like that happening. I definitely could. I don't think Jamel Dean is completely out of the woods yet. What I don't see happening, I think the likelihood that he's cut, I think that goes down a lot.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't rule out a trade necessarily because, like I said, there's a couple of corners here. I think if the Bucs feel good, let's say they draft a corner on day one, right? Let's say they draft a guy like a Jade Barron from Texas or Savon Ravel or even though he may be a day two guy at this point, but let's say they draft one of those guys. And then you're looking at a day two, and maybe you dangle Jamel Dean, right? Maybe you call a couple of teams and say, hey, do you want this guy, right? Do you have interest? Instead of taking your chances on a rookie, you can get a veteran here, right? So I wouldn't completely rule it out. I'm not going to say it's likely. Like, I don't expect it to happen, but I wouldn't completely rule out a Jamel Dean trade there. But I would right now, I would expect him on the roster, which, this is a surprise, but I would expect him there.
So we're going to wrap up today's episode with this. We've already got a good little bit of an argument here going back and forth between Christopher Cole and Rolla.
I have a couple of thoughts on that.
Well, that's really what I wanted to ask you, and that's, I think, the main idea of this entire episode. Yeah, we talked about the most recent moves and how those correspond to the Buccaneers roster, but the question we wanted to answer today is, have the Bucs done enough to win in 2025 with this roster? Jason Licht, Todd Bowles, no matter who it is, anytime they talk to the media and they're asked about building this team, the expectations are always Super Bowl. Baker Mayfield has said it on 17,000 podcasts. The expectations are Super Bowl week in and week out. There's no other reason to play the game at this point, right? I think that's why all 32 teams go all in, but some people like to be realistic about their situation if you're playing in Cleveland or something. Here is what I want to get into. This back and forth here, really talking about, I guess it was started by Rolla, who I'm going to quote the chat here. He says, Bucs are solid, but they're just not on the same level as the Eagles, Lions, Commanders, or any of the top dogs in the AFC. And then Chris said they beat all three of those teams last year. Rolla said, in the regular season, the playoffs are a totally different beast. Baker is a good regular season quarterback, but I don't love him in the playoffs when all the chips are on the table. So we've had the Baker Mayfield discussion before. I think most people know where you and I end up on it. They can argue all day about the chat, but I think we can take this conversation and just look at the Buccaneers as a whole, with Baker Mayfield, with Todd Bowles as head coach, with a new offensive coordinator in Josh Grizzard, with Chris Godwin back on the offensive side of the ball, with Hassan Reddick now added to the outside linebacker rotation, with guys like Kalijah Kancey, Yaya Diaby entering pivotal years, the offensive line being an anchor that we talked about to start the show. The secondary, still a little bit of a question mark, but you have some dogs in the secondary. We can't pretend that Antoine Winfield isn't still on this team. Tyke Smith is a guy who's going to have to develop, but he looked very promising. I think he was the one who ended the turnover drought, or the interception drought for the Buccaneers last season. And he was the one, I think, the last guy who had an interception before they had the drought. So, there are dogs all over this team. Vita Vea on the offensive side of the ball. Bucky Irving. Don't even get me started on Bucky Irving. Mike Evans still very much on this team. Levante David back for 2025. 35 years old. We've talked time and time again about Levante David, but a Buccaneers legend, one of the greatest to ever do it. Only, I think, 8 players in the NFL, in the history of the NFL, have over 1,600 tackles. Only 2 of them are playing right now. That is Levante David and Bobby Wagner. Truly 2 of the best to ever do it in the history of the game. Evan, is that enough for the Buccaneers to truly set their sights on a Lombardi Trophy? Do you think this team has what it takes to get further than they did last season?
Well, this team isn't complete right now. I mean,
you're right.
You still have. They're going to add 2 or 3 starters in this year's draft. So I mean, we have to see that, right? And here's the thing. I would say, okay, right now, as of today, I don't think they're on the level of the Eagles or the Lions, okay? Because I think, yeah, that is like the top of the NFC. The Eagles just won the Super Bowl in convincing fashion. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't say that the Bucs are on the same level as the defending Super Bowl champions right now. Like, yeah, sure, I can.
Is
Right?
that just
Yeah,
because you're a closeted Eagles fan and don't want to tell anybody?
sure, right. Everybody's gonna look at the hat and be like, "Oh, look at this guy."
He's a
Um,
Philly Bucks fan. It's
yeah, I know. um, people, yeah, it's like I like peel this wallpaper back and it's just
it's
midnight
all
green.
Eagles.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just, yeah. Um, but like that's the thing. Is that the thing about the Commanders, right?
It's a
The
green screen
Commanders,
Zoom backdrop. I'm sorry. I'm
yeah,
still thinking
yeah.
about
No,
that.
no, it's good. I got my Hertz jersey right here next to me. I actually I hold it every episode. I'm like, I just can't wait to put this on.
You know how AJ Brown has got the full diorama of like
Yeah,
the unit. You've got all of those for the starting
yeah, I got
lineup.
everything. Yeah. So the Commanders, right? I think the Buccaneers are pretty much on the almost the same level as the Commanders. Before last season, yeah, people were excited about Jaden Daniels, but nobody expected the Commanders to be in the NFC Championship game,
No
right?
chance.
Honestly, not many people expected the Eagles to be in the Super Bowl. What happened? Well, they got, obviously I think much more than they expected from Saquon Barkley. Okay. And then a lot of their players that they had drafted developed. Jalen Carter developed. Nolan Smith developed. Cooper DeJean developed. Quinyon Mitchell developed. Those guys were pivotal. N'Kobe Dean developed, right? The Buccaneers are in a similar boat. Rolla says the Bucs need to follow the Eagles' blueprint. You sign your core pieces, let role players come and go and draft well. That's how you sustain success. What have the Bucs been doing? What what do you think they've been doing here?
Well, look at all the guys. I mean, yeah, look
That
at
is the blueprint. That's
look
what
at-
they're doing.
yeah. I mean, you can make a list of all the core pieces the Buccaneers have. Mike Evans under contract, Chris Godwin under contract, Vita Vea under contract, Tristan Wirfs. We keep going.
He's under contract. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. Nobody leaves.
Levante David.
That's all they talked about after Chris Godwin had signed. All the national people talked about was Jason Light. They don't let these guys leave. That's what they're doing. Like that is what they're doing. They're trying to draft well. They're trying to develop. So maybe right now they're not on a Super Bowl level of the Eagles or the Lions. I still think, despite the playoff disappointment, I still think the Lions are freaking awesome. Right? They're a great team. Or maybe they're not on the level of a Ravens or a Bills or maybe even a Chiefs. Even though the Chiefs were a little up and down last year, right? Still made it to the Super Bowl. Maybe they're not right now. But that's also hard to say when you have an entire draft, and also you just don't know because there's things that the Eagles, a lot of people weren't expecting with the Eagles that happened. There's things that people, especially with the Commanders, were not expecting to happen. So what if Tyke Smith continues to develop? What if Kalijah Cansey takes another step? What if, like we talked about earlier, Graham Barton takes another step? What if Jalen McMillan takes another step? What if the Buccaneers draft, hit a good draft pick, right, on the 19th overall pick and their second round pick, and they become contributors? Well, then you're looking at it a little bit differently, right? What if Yaya Diaby, continues to develop? Antoine Field Jr. has a bounce back season. Well, yeah, then maybe you're looking at it a little bit differently. So right now, no, I don't think they're on level with the Eagles or the Lions or the top of the top in the AFC. But that doesn't mean that they can't be. And unfortunately, you won't really. That's sort of something where, like, on paper, I don't know if the roster is going to reflect that right away. But again, on paper, Washington did not scream like a team that was going to be in the NFC title game. It just didn't happen.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Again, a lot of that point that you addressed was Bucs need to follow the Eagles' blueprint. You sign your core pieces, let players come and go, and draft well. That was kind of what that response was. But
yeah, and that's what the Bucs have done. People have been complaining that the Buccaneers aren't active enough in free agency.
In his response, Rolla, in a classic move, kind of adjusts the goalpost here, and he says there's levels to this, Evan. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The Eagles players are just better.
You are correct.
Yeah, I mean,
they just won the Super Bowl.
It's not wrong, but the point that I think you were addressing mostly there was the fact that, yeah, the Buccaneers have their own blueprint, and it's working for now. I guess. I don't know. We'll see.
What I'm also saying is, like March 26, 2024, it wasn't, oh my God, well, the Eagles, yep, they're going to win. Wow,
Right.
look at this team. This team,
You remember
that
when
wasn't like
Sirianni?
that.
You remember the discussions
During
on
the
Nick
season,
Yeah.
they wanted him fired.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like
All
yeah,
my friends, my buddy Brian from Philly texted me literally the other day. I sent him some pictures of the game that we went to. That was the week 3 loss the Buccaneers had, or maybe the week 4 loss. I don't remember, but it was a really good time. He texted me before the playoffs. He's like, it was before that Bucs game. He was like, I hate Sirianni. He's like, they need to can this guy. And then it was even worse after the playoff loss. So I mean,
okay. And then Rolla says that's why they play 17 games though. But you're already doing that with the Buccaneers. So you're already putting the Buccaneers in a category. Well, they play 17 games though. So I don't know. Okay, I'm not gonna. The Bucs. What you described as the Eagles' blueprint is what the Bucs have been doing. I'm not sure how close you've been following it. Okay, and based on how you've talked, right? I'm not even sure. Are you a Bucks fan? Or you? I don't know. I'm not saying this to be mean or anything. I'm genuinely curious. Just the thing. I think you guys have a good team. I just think there's levels to this. It just doesn't really sound like a dude who's follows the Buccaneers very closely.
yeah, there's
That's
truth
what
in
the blueprint is. What the Buccaneers. That's what the Buccaneers have done since 2019. Like, yeah, okay, they signed Tom Brady and they signed a couple other. That's it.
Well, that kind of established that established, I think, the blueprint for what they do now. It was, I know it sounds cliche and corny, but the standard of excellence around here, the front office, honestly, it felt like they leveled up in how they operate, not only during that era, but after that era. You've had a couple of things fall through, but it does feel like there is a little bit more of a higher regard for keeping their guys around, and then not only just the success rate of hitting on their guys as well.
I am going to look at the Buccaneers 2024 depth chart, okay? For people that don't believe, oh, they're not following the Eagles' blueprint, or they are, okay? It's actually a blueprint that probably the Buccaneers had started because the Buccaneers have been doing this for longer than the Eagles have.
I mean, they did when they're. I know the Eagles got their Super Bowl back in 2017, but
yep,
different era.
Yeah, but that wasn't
different era.
I could go on and on, but anyways, okay. So quarterback Baker Mayfield was a free agent. Okay, Bucky Irving drafted, Rachaad White drafted, Mike Evans drafted, Chris Godwin drafted, Jim McMillan drafted, Trey Palmer drafted, Kate Otten drafted. Payne Durham, drafted. The entire tight end room was drafted. Tristan Wirfs, drafted. Ben Bredesen, free agency. Okay. Not really any crazy signings in free agency so far, right? They signed Baker Mayfield to a 1-year, $8 million deal. Just so happened to work, right? The Eagles signed Zach Bond to a 1-year deal. It worked, and they re-signed him for big money, right? Graham Barton, drafted. Cody Mauch, drafted. Luke Gedeke, drafted. Kalijah Kancey, drafted. Vita Vea, drafted. Logan Hall, drafted. Yaya Diaby, drafted. Levante David, not by this regime, but was drafted, right? Chris Braswell, drafted. Jamel Dean, drafted. Jordan Whitehead, drafted. Antoine Winfield Jr., drafted. Zion McCollum, drafted. Tyke Smith, drafted. Tariq Funderburk, undrafted free agent. Christian Izien, undrafted free agent. Yes, most of their team is drafted. Like, I don't understand that you need to follow the Eagles' blueprint. This is the same blueprint. Like, yes, the Eagles are better, right? Like the Eagles, I'm not saying that. But again, I also think that there's a way that the Buccaneers, and actually Kalijah Kancey's like numbers and stuff, and I understand. I think Jalen Carter's a better player, but when you look at the numbers, they're actually quite similar over their first like couple years.
And I think Kalijah Kancey's missed more games.
Yeah, he has, and that's obviously hard, and that's an issue, right? But the fact is that the blueprint. Well, that's the same blueprint that the Buccaneers are following. Now, whether you think the Buccaneers just don't have good enough players, that's another story, right? And maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I also don't think you can answer that question right now in March.
Yeah.
Right? So let's look back at this in November And then we'll see, right? Because if Kalijah Kancey takes another step, and Yabi takes another step, and Jalen McMillan takes another step, and Tyke Smith takes another step, and Anthony Miller Jr. bounces back, all things that you need to have happen, and like any championship team needs to have happen, right? The Buccaneers don't win the Super Bowl in 2020 if Tristan Wirfs and Anthony Miller Jr. aren't as good at, of rookies as they are, right? They probably don't win, but. If that happens and their draft picks, right, just like the Eagles, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean made an immediate impact, a significant immediate impact right away, right? If their draft picks make that impact, you're looking at one of the best teams in the NFC. I mean, you just probably are. So, yeah, I agree. Right now, today, sure, the Eagles are better. Sure, the Lions are better. But that also doesn't mean that right now in March that I'm going to sit here and say, well, yeah, they're just not, they can't get there because they clearly can. And unfortunately, you're not going to have your answer for a long time.
No, you're right. And as you had alluded to, it's not necessary.
Sorry, one more thing.
You're good. Do your thing.
He said there's a lot of ifs in that statement. There is. Okay. The Eagles suffered the biggest hang on.
Yep.
The Eagles suffered the biggest collapse in their franchise history the season before. The Buccaneers eliminated them in the playoffs. There was a ton of... You mean to tell me there wasn't a ton of ifs with that Eagles team? Come on. Like, you're kidding yourself if you think there wasn't a ton of ifs with that Eagles team. Saquon Barkley, nobody realized he was going to rush for 2,000 yards. Are you kidding me? Like, come on. There was people questioning whether Jalen Hurts was the guy. Again, Nick Sirianni, people wanted him fired after the Bucs beat him in the playoffs. They wanted him fired after the Bucs beat him in week 4. Like, give me a break. Like seriously, give me a break with the ifs. Every team has ifs. I can tell you that right now.
I think one of the things that may be lost in translation here as well as we continue to argue with the live chat. We appreciate your participation. It has extended the show today. But I think what got lost in translation is that when it comes to 2024, Rolla put out an initial claim that the Bucs weren't better than these teams. The Eagles had better players. Nobody argued that point. 2024, the Super Bowl champs of the world, they had the best players in the league. There is no discussion there. Nobody is saying that the Buccaneers players are better than the Eagles players.
I'm not saying that.
It's just, we were addressing and have been addressing the entire time this comment that was thrown out there that said, the Bucs need to follow the Eagles blueprint, because it's just not true, and it's nonsensical. And I think that, Rolla here may think we're talking about something else because he is continually moving the goalposts. Like, oh, I didn't say this. I said this. Oh, you're not talking about this. You're talking about this. No, brother. We're talking about your blueprint comment that you decided to post in our live chat, and now we've spent the last 15 minutes breaking it down. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jason Light deserves all the credit for whatever blueprint we want to call it. You call it the fucking Sean McVay blueprint for all I care. I don't care. He deserves credit for how he has built this team, the process that they now have. It is a blueprint that a lot of teams in the NFL wish that they had. They may have more talent in certain areas. They may have more star power in certain position groups, but there's a lot of GMs who wish that their front office was able to do what Jason Light and the Bucs have been able to do over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And again, it just, right now, no, like I don't think they're, a Super Bowl team, but I also cannot predict anybody, developing. Like I can't, you can't say, well, yeah, in the back of my mind, well, oh yeah, the Eagles are obviously going to win the Super Bowl because Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are just going to be awesome as rookies. And like, I don't know that, you didn't know that after they were drafted. Right. So it's hard. Right. It is hard right now. They're not right now. That's my whole argument. Right now. I don't believe the Buccaneers are, but the Buccaneers can be. That's what I believe. Right now, they're not, but they can be. And unfortunately, you're not going to have that answer until they start playing football.
I agree. No,
we appreciate you in the chat. It's a good chat, right? But relax.
It is a good chat. We always love a good civil discussion with the people.
Okay, and then again, wants to move the goalposts.
Yeah, it's not about this; it's about that.
Hang on. Well, credit. He says credit for what? The Buccaneers just lost a home playoff game to a rookie quarterback. Calm down there, Sparky. Well, listen, Sparky. Okay. You just mentioned the Commanders as being one of the top dogs in the NFC. You said behind the Eagles, the Commanders are one of them. So now you want to say the Commanders are a top dog, but then you also want to say, well, they lost to a rookie quarterback. Well, that's one of the top dogs in the NFC apparently. So yeah, give me a break.
You sound like Rick Stroud, champ, buddy, pal.
Yeah, listen here, Bucko,
Buckaroo.
Yep.
Oh, goodness gracious. Hey, we appreciate everybody hanging out with us today.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah,
we appreciate the lively discussion for sure.
This is what it's all about, man. Chopping it up, talking football. We greatly appreciate you. Whether you've watched the show before or this is your first time checking it out, thank you for taking the time to give us a watch. MK, our good buddy Mikey Kelly, Rolla, of course, Cecil Stover, Aaron Laymaster, Leadus Productions, the legendary Leadus Productions, who personally supplies me with my Buccaneers fill of content throughout the season. Some of the best highlight videos in the game. Official like a ref on a whistle. Mike Evans repost this guy's edits, guys. I mean, like, Leadus is definitely worth checking out. Cecil Stover, who I think I already mentioned. Mikey B. Christopher Cole. Can't forget Chris. Thank you, Chris. Anybody else that I may have missed. Neil L. at the very beginning. Thank you guys once again. We will talk to you soon with more Tampa Bay Buccaneers news and discussion. But as of
next
right
time
now,
we talk to you, it'll be full draft season. So it'll be the next couple of shows will be more draft centric.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Rolo, we get enough hate during the year for not being homers. So this is the
Brother,
wrong podcast.
You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, this is the wrong podcast to come in here and say that we're just too homer because you got to find selection.
Yeah, you should see some of our comment sections then. Just take a look at when the season prediction show comes out in August and we don't predict them to go 17-0. You'll have to check out that comment section.
Mikey Kelly says kicker second round.
Why not?
Why not? I mean,
need depth.
Dare I say?
Hey, if Money Mac goes down, who are you going to rely on?
Well, dare I say punter? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They did
sign Riley Dixon, but
that's what I'm saying. Is Riley Dixon going to be worth the investment? You never know. You never know. You could be biting yourself, wishing you had that second round pick back in your pocket. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. You can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. And check out his written work at BucsNation.com. You got anything in the hopper?
Yeah, so like I said, Bucs Nation, we're doing our draft profiles right now. So doing all that fun stuff. And I already have one of mine out. That's on Savon Ravel, the cornerback from East Carolina. And then I will be having another one out tomorrow. So stay tuned for that, BucsNation.com. And not just me. I'm not the only one doing it. We're covering a lot of different prospects leading up to the draft. I'm going to have a full first-round mock draft written on BucsNation.com before the draft. So stay tuned to that. And then on here, like I said, we're going to be turning those articles from BucsNation.com. I'm going to be doing videos, like the short form videos there, just talking a little bit more in depth about these guys and potential Bucs targets. So stay tuned for that on the Campfire Podcast YouTube channel.
I'm excited for that. Going to be a lot of fun and it's insightful stuff. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram, and Twitter at Retticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I'll follow you back. And follow my new project at Video Americana. All one word, Video Americana. Every single platform you can think of.
Some cool stuff.
Yeah, with video. Thank you, man. I appreciate you checking it out. If you like travel and exploration, the best way I can describe it is if the travel channel, the history channel, and the food channel had a baby.
That is kind of, that's good.
Yeah, we're putting out some unique stuff. It's a nice departure from what I've been doing for the last 10 or so years, and we're having a lot of fun. So Video Americana, all one word. Thank you guys again for hanging out with us today on the show. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We will see you in the next one with some more Buccaneer news. Thank you, as always, for listening, and go Bucs.